Hi, hello. Welcome back to the Unpack podcast. My name is Deanne, and I'm so glad to have you guys here with me again. And if you're new, welcome. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Okay, so it is the first episode of the year, which is so exciting. I hope you guys all started off your year strong and just with good vibes and good energy. For me, I feel like this is like the calmest new year I've ever experienced. I feel like it was just so calm, so zen, and the vibes were good as always. We created our vision boards like a while ago, but just like setting the intention for the new year and just like really getting into it. I feel like for me, like the main thing this year is to not only set goals and achieve them, but also have room for change and spontaneity. I feel like these past few years, like especially around the New Year's, like we're all like amped and hyped to like start our whole new lives, and it's like the whole new year, new me, which is not a bad thing, but I just feel like sometimes, at least for me, I can come off really, really strong. And when I do, I tend to like burn out quicker. So I started off really calm, very zen this year, which I truly appreciate. And I'm honestly happy about it. Anywho, vision boards are created. The vision is there, the intentions are there, and yeah, I'm just ready to put it into action. And I'm also like a true believer of like pretending, I guess, or setting the intention to becoming the person that you want to be, and then you'll become them. If that makes any sense. It's like a different version of fake it till you make it. You know what I mean? The hardest part about change and just like new environments and stuff like that is the feeling that you don't belong and that feeling of imposter syndrome. And I know that the majority of us deal with it. A lot of people, like regardless of age, regardless of anything, deal with imposter syndrome because a lot of the times, even though you're doing the work and you're doing it right and you're excelling in something, you can't just like get away from this feeling that you're not meant to be there or you're lacking in a way, and also like the feeling of you don't deserve that thing that you just worked so hard for. And honestly, it's something that I've like struggled with for so long. Like these past couple of years, I've struggled with feeling like I'm not meant to be somewhere, or the fact that I just don't fit in, or I'm not as smart as the rest of the group, or just like some smaller things, you know what I mean? And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was always in my own head, and just the idea of I didn't feel like I was meant to be in the room with everybody else, or I didn't deserve to be there. The craziest part is that I honestly just convinced myself that that's who I was. Like, I'm the girl that's just not good enough. I'm the girl that doesn't fit in. And I just like took that on as my identity. And I guess like it didn't help the fact that a lot of people didn't look like me. So I just like even internalized the idea that I'm different than everybody else a little bit more, even though like the people around me were really nice. Like, I don't think I had a problem with anybody, and they didn't make me feel like an outsider. However, I still convinced myself that I was. The thing is, with me, I struggled with labeling and stuff like that so much, um, because I like to keep things organized. Like, in my head, if I labeled myself as XYZ, it was a lot easier for me to like portray myself and I guess just like interact with the environments that I was in. I guess it was kind of like my own little weird way of navigating the world. especially when I was transitioning into my adult life. And I also convinced myself that feeling imposter syndrome or feeling social anxiety and stuff like that was a me thing. Like, I convinced myself in my head that I was the only one experiencing it in the world. And it's funny because I knew I wasn't. I knew there was more people experiencing this. And according to statistics, it's about 70 to 87% of people experience imposter syndrome. So it's a lot more common than anything else. So I kind of want to dive more into what imposter syndrome is and how to get over it. So imposter syndrome is the inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. And imposter syndrome also is associated with perfectionism, paralysis, people pleasing, and procrastination. They're all somewhat associated, which is honestly not a shocker. But according to psychologists and sociologists, there's 5 different types of imposter syndrome. So the first one is the perfectionist, right? So it's this constant need for everything to be perfect, and they go above and beyond to do so. But the one thing that they're afraid of is the fact that they're not doing enough or they're not good enough at what they're doing. So they constantly try harder and keep on berating themselves on the fact that they're not perfect. The second one is the natural genius, right? So this person feels that they need to work extra hard to achieve something because it takes them longer to complete tasks compared to others. And I feel like I kind of like dabbled between the two because I was always in a very competitive environment. So I wanted to, one, not only exceed, but also just like be perfect in a way. So I like worked extra hard and I never thought that I was good enough. So I always added more hours to my day or studied harder or just put in more effort that honestly was not necessary. And another major thing was I had a completely different learning style in comparison to other people. So people were picking things up a lot quicker than I was because a lot of the stuff that I did was like reading, and a lot of the classes and stuff I took was based on reading rather than hands-on experience. And I learned better when I have hands-on experience. So it was just like it was extremely frustrating for me to constantly get things wrong and not do as well as people around me because of the fact that I wasn't learning the way that I learn, which obviously made it way more frustrating for me, and it just didn't feel good. Like, obviously, a lot of the times it sucks when you fail at something, but I guess like that just reinforced the fact that I wasn't good enough. Therefore, I needed to put in more effort and more time and just like do what other people were doing in order to succeed because clearly it was working for them. And it took me so long to get out of that mindset and just like realize that I just learned different in comparison to everybody else, that my brain is different. And I was just like, I learned to give myself grace. I feel like that was like the hardest thing for me to do, is to give myself grace because I was constantly hard on myself and I was always pushing myself to be perfect. Okay, so the third type of imposter syndrome is the expert, right? So it's the person that feels like an imposter because they don't know everything about a particular topic. And they believe that if you haven't like reached that expert level, therefore you are a failure, therefore you are an imposter, which also relates to the first two types in a way because it's like this idea that I need to know everything or I know nothing. But I guess I've also struggled with that and the idea of having to know everything and just like reminding myself that everything is a learning process. Life is a learning process. And with time, you'll like have certain expertise, but there's always room for error, change, and also a lesson for you to learn, right? If something doesn't work out, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know nothing, but it just means that you need to tweak things here and there in order to move forward. So, these next two types of imposter syndrome are very similar. So, we have the soloist that thinks that asking for help is a weakness or a lack of knowledge. And if you don't do it 100% yourself, you feel incapable or you feel like you haven't really accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. And the last type is the super person, which believes that you must do the hardest work or achieve the highest level of success to avoid feeling like a fraud. So, as I said, these two are very much in the same ballpark. So, let's quickly talk about the soloist. A lot of the time, they believe that they should be able to handle everything by themselves with no expectations, right? It's almost like it's a one person show to prove that you are capable. It's not the fact that sometimes you want to do things by yourself, it's the fact that you want to feel that sense of accomplishment and to tell yourself, hey, I'm capable of doing this by myself, or I'm capable of doing everything by myself. But the thing is, when we refuse to accept help from others, we're just like isolating ourselves further and further, and it's just making things harder than they really need to be. So it's not about like weakness or any of that. It's just like recognizing the fact that teamwork and being able to collaborate with others doesn't take away from your ability to do things. Like, you're still capable of doing everything that you want to do, but when you work with others, you're enhancing that and you're making it easier for yourself. And then here comes the super person that basically convinced themselves that they need to be the absolute best, right? Like, they would work 6 or 7 hours more because, hey, like, they need to outdo the regular person. And when it comes to that, you end up tying your worth to how much you can accomplish, and becoming perfect is impossible. So you're constantly chasing something that's impossible, which would make you feel exhausted, and you'll often end up falling short, and you'll feel like you're an imposter or fraud or you're not good enough. Um, so it's honestly completely exhausting because no matter how much you do, it would never feel enough for you. So all five of these different types of imposter syndrome all stem from this fear of inadequacy, driving people to just like overcompensate in ways that ultimately leave you feeling unworthy and unaccomplished. So, the major players of this feeling of imposter syndrome is the environment, right? The environment that you're in, the environment that you grew up in, and the environment your brain developed. Another major thing is the way you were conditioned. So, the people that you interacted with growing up and the people that you keep around. And as I always say, that anything mental is somewhat physical in your brain. So there's so many different players when it comes to imposter syndrome in our brain, right? There's the neurotransmitters, the limbic system is involved, and the prefrontal cortex. So, as we know, that the limbic system is our emotional regulation, where the amygdala is actually going to be overactive, and it's going to start triggering fear and anxiety, and it's going to trigger that feeling of self doubt and worthlessness, leading to anxiety and depression. And then there comes our prefrontal cortex that's responsible for making decisions and just like critical thinking. And that also becomes overactive because a lot of the times when we're dealing with imposter syndrome, there's so much overthinking and self criticism just present, and it's going to be overactive due to that. And as we know, there's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin that also influences our self-esteem and self-worth. And all these are just chemicals that are released by our brain and our bodies in order to navigate the world. And it's a very big contributor when it's like not functioning properly to have a lot of negative self perception, which is seen in a lot of people that like deal with imposter syndrome. So a lot of this is due to our mindset, right? It's our way of thinking and the way that we like accustomed to the world, right? So when we're dealing with imposter syndrome, a lot of the time we associate achievements and the stuff that we've actually succeeded at to luck or timing. We like to put a lot of our success and all that due to external factors rather than our own abilities. The craziest thing is the more successful we become, the stronger the feeling of imposter syndrome can be. So it's like we constantly reinforce the fact that we're not good enough, therefore we need to chase higher, or we need to work harder, or we need to do above and beyond in order to feel a sense of achievement. And for me, I kind of like to think of it like an addiction, right? So, like, like adrenaline junkies, you look for a crazier stunt to do. It's kind of like that because it's like we're constantly reinforcing it, right? We're looking for something harder for us to do in order to feel success. So, instead of like looking for a crazier stunt, we're looking for a harder task in order to like chase success or this feeling of achievement. So the question is now, how do we stop feeling imposter syndrome and start that healing process? So, like every other addiction or every other problem, the first step is to actually acknowledge it. Admit that we have a problem with chasing success and also berating ourselves. It's a very harsh reality to come to, but when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, at some point you just need to go head in and be like, hey, like I'm dealing with this issue. How can I fix it? So how I kind of got over imposter syndrome and stuff like that is to first off acknowledge it. I write all these letters to myself, right? I talk about how I'm feeling and the steps that I'm taking in order to heal. So I document it all, and I tend to go and read back on a lot of the journal entries that I've done. And the way I write my journal entries is I write a letter and I write it to myself. I know I mentioned this in previous podcasts, but I like to write letters to myself. So I always start off with Dear Rian, right? And then I just like word vomit on the paper. And a lot of the times I talk about how I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And after I write that journal entry, I give myself time to kind of just breathe, right? Just let it all out. I just breathe in and I breathe out. Then I read it again and I ask myself why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling and what's causing me to feel this way, right? Because a lot of emotions is cause and effect. So I want to like deep dive on the cause. And it could just be like a certain incident that I didn't like or just something small. And then when I acknowledge it, I feel better. The other major thing that I do is I practice healthy self-talk. So we all heard the jingle like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words would never hurt me. But I honestly think it's false because words carry so much weight. And I just became more mindful of what I say to myself, right? And when you repeat negative words to yourself, it becomes negative beliefs and it just becomes internalized truths. As I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, I struggled a lot with labels because I would always say these words to myself like, Rihanna, you're the quiet person. You're not as smart as everybody else in the room. You're not this, you're not that. And eventually you internalize those words and it becomes your truth. So just like being cautious about what you say to yourself, because when you do, it will literally change your whole world. And when I catch myself saying like something negative about myself, I call myself out for it. Like, I know it sounds silly, but like, if I say something that I wouldn't say to anybody else, but I said it to myself, I'd be like, Riam, what's up? Like, why'd you say that? So I would call myself out for all the negative things that I say about myself. And then I'll take my time to just analyze it. And I also figure out why I said that to myself. And then I would literally scrap it. And I would be like, that is not who I am. So, kind of just like expanding off of that, I tend to look at the positive in everything, right? We all have setbacks in life, it's inevitable. So, just like viewing it as redirection rather than rejection, right? Because everything was written the way it was supposed to be written, and you're just following that. And if a door is closed, you look for one that's open, right? Because you can just stand outside of a closed door, you're not really going to get anywhere. Um, and just like being okay with yourself. I always tend to reassure myself that I am where I'm supposed to be, that I was meant to be here. Because a lot of the times you feel uncomfortable in a room, right? There's this thing that my mom always says. She says the door opened for you because you were meant to go inside. You're there to discover new things and conquer the room, right? You're not there to be a know it all. You're not there to be perfect. You're there to learn, which is honestly something that I carry with me everywhere I go. And I just like really acknowledge the fact that I made it here. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm happy that I'm here. And I don't have to be the know it all. I don't have to be perfect to be here. The whole point is to grow, not to be perfect. Another like big thing that kind of helped me get out of this mindset of I didn't achieve anything or imposter syndrome is celebrating my wins. Like, I celebrate small wins, I celebrate big wins. So when you celebrate yourself, it's showing you how much effort you put into it, and it's also like allowing you to acknowledge that you did that. You know what I mean? That you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, that you are succeeding, and it's just kind of like treating every day as an opportunity to recognize your own progress. Because if you don't look at the progress, you'll never know where you started and where you are now, or if you've grown in a way that you wanted to grow in. Last but not least is embracing your intellectual authenticity, embracing your true feelings and being able to share them, your ideas, your opinions, without fear. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times we're scared to share our true feelings and ideas because you feel like you're going to hurt somebody or people aren't going to agree with you. But if you constantly just agree with everybody else around you, you're constantly reinforcing and feeding the idea that you are a fraud or you're an imposter. So just like feel free to share whatever you want to share. Anywho, before I end this episode today, I wanted to leave you guys with a poem, as I do every episode. This one is from a book called Homebody by Rupi Kaur, and the poem I want to read today is, I thought I could accomplish my way into being happy, but nothing on the outside fulfilled me in the way it had promised. So, from this poem, what I got was to not, well, I guess it's pretty straightforward, but just not to put so much worth, so much of your self worth in external things. Don't put your happiness, don't put the way you feel about yourself and everything around you into things outside of yourself. It's to find that within, because if you're constantly chasing what's out there and trying to find your happiness outside of you, one, you'll be extremely disappointed. And the other thing is you're constantly going to be chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. So it's like the idea of chasing success, right? You constantly do amazing things. And even though you've accomplished so much, it will never be enough because you're constantly chasing something bigger, like the idea of being bigger. And it's not bad to just like have more accomplishments, but it's like whether you're doing it for you or if you're doing it for others or if you're doing it for a feeling of euphoria or whatever. Um, so just do things for you, do things that you want to do, because at the end of this, I know I say this quite frequently, but at the end of this, we die. So it's just like we don't take any of our accomplishments with us. So try to find happiness in every day and just choose you, and things will work out. So, yeah, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a comment and a review. And if you like this podcast, feel free to share it with anybody who you think might like it. Share it with your friends, your family, strangers, I don't know. And if you guys ever want to connect, I am on socials. I'm mainly on Instagram at VansPOV. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next episode. I hope you guys all have a lovely, lovely start to your year. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. I will see you guys next week. Bye.